welcome to Backlinking, the PKM podcast. And in today's episode, we are going to talk about something that is a little different, a little personal, but I still think that it is important for everyone in the productivity space, both those who actually review applications like I do, but also for those who actually watch reviews. I think there are a lot of important things in this podcast to be discussed. And the reason behind this podcast, which is a little important to start with the backstory here, is that I did a review on an application, or not a review, a first impression. And I think these first impression videos are really important because they actually give an honest opinion on how easy this application is to learn. And why I say honest is because, like, when I've used Notion, now I've learned an application like Notion, I feel that it is easy. Like I say that, for example, it is easy to learn. No, sorry, it has a learning curve. Notion has a learning curve. I always said that, but there are good videos you can learn from because I was able to learn from those videos. That doesn't mean that everyone will be able to watch those videos and actually learn something. So I think it is really important to do a first impression on new applications to give the audience a better sense of how easy is this actually when you first start off. And the second reason is that it seems like people like it. My view counts, my likes, my comments, it shows that people actually like these first impression videos. And I always say in my first impression videos that these are first impression videos. Like, I did one for Squirtle. I came back a couple of weeks later. In the first one, I said that Squirtle is terrible. It is too expensive. A couple of weeks later, I came back and I decided that it was actually really good, worth the pricing, and I actually paid for the application myself. So my thoughts might change depending on just depending on what happens from I film the first impression to, like, I jump into the application and I actually test it out and I see all of the features and I learn the application. And that also gives you an understanding of, for you to be able to use this application and feel good about this application, you actually have to learn a few things. There are differences here between applications. Like Squirtle is one of those that you have to actually learn the features before it makes a lot of sense. On the other hand, you have Milanote, where you can learn a lot of the advanced features later, but the application feels really good out of the box as well. So there is a difference there. Again, these are only my opinions. But back to the first impression video I just filmed. It was an application called Notebook AI. The video will be out either the day before or 1 or 2 days after this podcast. And Notebook AI was probably the worst first impression video I've had so far. And the reason for that was that it lacked in many ways. Like, the web clipper didn't work. It had a lot of buttons for features in their web version, but when I clicked them, I just got a pop-up that showed me a way to download the mobile application. For example, you could press the record voice button, but that would only prompt you to download the mobile application. Web Clipper did not work. There was a problem with the pricing plan. It says that on the free plan, you should have access to all features for a limited time. It did not work for me personally. A lot of things like that, and also a couple of small ones. Like, for a note-taking app, I expect to be able to write a note. For an application called Notebook, I accept to be able to write a note. That is my expectation. I should be able to press on my keyboard. I have my keyboard right here. I should be able to press buttons on here to see text on my screen. That is an expectation I have. And it does that. The only issue is that in order to be able to write text inside of Notebook AI, you actually have to press copy text button. There is a button that is called copy text. You click that and you're able to write text, which feels really weird to me. Like, why not do something as simple as call that one write instead of calling it copy text? So all of these things combined gave me a really uh, bad first impression of this application, which brings me to my point, and that is for all of those who review applications, because on one hand, like, I'm committed to the audience. That is the most important thing. I want my audience to have the best information, to have the best updates, and to have my honest thoughts on an application. Um, because believe it or not, people actually listen to reviewers' recommendations and decide to test out applications and pay for application based on reviews. And if even one person does that, it is really important to me to have the peace of mind around the fact that I've been honest and I've given my opinion based on the facts that I have, and the like feeling and how the application felt for me. That is really important, and I think that is really important for a lot of reviewers. But on the other hand, I don't like talking badly about an application, about a product that someone has poured their probably their heart and soul into. And that is just because I've been there. Like, I've run my own business. I've had a clothing brand when I've sold actual products, and you pour your heart and soul into it, and it doesn't always work out. Like, the application can end up bad, or in my case, the clothes can end up being too pricey, for example, and you get a lot of negative feedback around that. So you don't want to destroy applications or talk them down or destroy their reputation. Again, this doesn't apply that much to me personally, at least not right now, because I only have around 4,000 subscribers. I think we're closing into 4,000 subscribers. So if you haven't done so already, please do subscribe. Um, but I think it is important to have like a thought process around it anyways, because we don't want to be here crashing or destroying or talking down applications. And this has been a debate around reviewers before. And I've just thought that, like, if let me put it in another way. Most applications I test out are great. Craft, Milanote, Scrintl, Notion, Tana, Capacities. Like, most applications are great. Most of them aren't for me personally. For example, Scrintl, I had a productivity system around Scrintl. It did not work out. But that doesn't mean that Scrintl is a bad application. For a lot of people, Scrintl will work perfectly fine. But for me, it did not. So most of the applications are great. They just have different. They are just for different types of people, and also it is a little different for me because I test out applications that are in a really early stage, and that is just because no one else does it, which gives me a competitive edge. Like, when you search for some of these new applications, I am one of the only one that shows up. That is the first one, but the most important one is that um, there was YouTubers back when I got into the PKM space that did the same thing, and I would watch every single one of their videos, and it was just so fun. So I wanted to do some of the same things because those YouTubers don't put out as much content anymore. So I decided to do it myself. So I try to review applications that are really new, because if like, just take Notion as an example. If I wanted to review something like Notion, there are probably thousands of reviews out there already. We don't need another Notion review. I still talk about Notion, but in a little bit of a different way. So, I review applications that are in a really, really early stage, which means that bugs are to be expected, which means that the application won't always run smoothly. These are the issues of reviewing like really early applications. Like I've tested AnyType in alpha, I tested Tana back when it was in alpha. I am currently testing a to-do list application, which I'm actually considering using. More on that in my productivity stack video, where I talk about the applications I am going to use, which will be out at some point this year, but I'm not sure when. But I'm currently testing out an application that is in a really early stage. I think it's been developed for a few months to a year. I think it's like 8 months to a year, probably a little bit more. So it is a really new application. A lot of bugs, but I am still enjoying it. And I think what's important is that you have to land the fundamentals. What does that mean? That means that like easy things like calling it right instead of copy text, or having all of your different applications, whether that's iOS, Mac, web, being on the same version. Like you can't have a web version that looks completely different from your Mac application. Things like that, I think, is really important. I have criticized applications for both of those things, for writing things wrong or having a terrible UI. And I've also talked about Mem, for example, which had at some point a lot of different versions. So I think you have to have the fundamentals right in order for me to talk positively about the application. Like the fundamentals of the application, they need to be there, and then you can build on top of that. But if you can't land the fundamentals, then we have a big problem. I will criticize applications that struggle with the fundamental things a lot more than I will do for applications that have a lot of minor issues. But if you have a lot of fundamental issues, and you might say that like copy text instead of write is a minor issue, but in my eyes, if you can't land something as simple as that, uh, we will probably have an issue in the future with the application. I think things like that are really important. And I'm not saying that Notebook AI is a terrible application. I'm just trying to explain why I ended up criticizing this a lot more than many of the other applications I test out in my first impression videos. Again, my thoughts on Notebook AI might change in a month or two when I go back to actually review the application, but I'm just trying to explain how my brain works, how I think around like uh, these first impression videos, and how I end up giving my final thoughts on the application. Again, if you're new, I always end my videos off with final thoughts around updates around applications, and how I give my final thoughts on these first impression videos is um, with this idea of how is the fundamentals of this application. Are we able to nail the things that are easy? Then probably you can also work on the things that are a little harder. uh, that isn't always right, but that is like how I think in these first impression videos. Then when I do full reviews, there are a lot more stuff I add on top, but not being able to fix a lot of these smaller ones quickly becomes an issue. And that is why I I think I said it in the video as well, but I'm going to say it here as well. Notebook AI, um, the first impression there was one of the one of the worst first impressions I've had of an application, which doesn't say that much because I've only done like 10 or 15 videos. But I also have like another thing is that if you copy other applications, that is also something I struggle with. And I'm not talking about copying the UI UX of the application. I'm talking about copying the idea. Like we don't need 8 different AI chatbot applications where you put things into it and you can then talk to your notes. We don't need 8 or 10 or 15 of those. And when we get a lot of those, I have to end up comparing them to each other because we can't have 8, 9, 10, 15, 20 of these applications live for 5 to 10 years. Like at some point, we will end up having 1, 2, or 3 applications that are close to each other. Then we will have different applications as well, but we can't have 10, 15 applications that do exactly the same thing in exactly the same way. So sometimes I actually have to compare things to each other, and the same goes for an application like AI Notebook. It is a study tool, so I have to compare it to the other big study note-taking app used by professionals and students, and that is RemNote, which is a great tool. So the bar is set really high for a lot of these new applications. So sometimes I feel like I'm too strict on them. Maybe an easier way of talking about them would be to say that, like, in these new applications, bugs are to be expected. You should be patient. You should be patient with these applications. I wouldn't recommend it to everyone, but for people who are really into the PKM space, you can jump in and test out these applications. So maybe I should put it in that way in the future. There is no right or wrong answer here. The point I'm trying to make is that I think I and a lot of other reviewers, not everyone, because there will always be bad actors out there, but I think a lot of reviewers are trying to do their best to balance this. Like, don't destroy an application, but be as honest as you can, or just be honest. And also do not try to destroy the reputation of an application or a brand. I'm always going to try to be, not even try, I'm always going to be respectful towards the people who have put an effort into making the application. But on the other hand, if the application is bad, I have to say that it is bad. Luckily for me, a lot of these applications are really, really good. Um, the last thing I wanted to touch on is this new application that I am testing out, which has a lot of bugs, but I am using it and I am planning to use it as my task manager tool. And that is simply because even with the bugs, the experience, the design, the way everything feels, it just feels really good. That is also important. And again, that is also highly personal. But the application you're using, it needs to feel good. Like when I jump into my note-taking application, for example, it has to be a joy because I will have to spend a lot of time inside of that application. For most people, that is their to-do list application or daily planner. That is where most people spend most of their time. I spend most of my time in my note-taking slash project management tool. That is where I spend most of my time. But the point still stands that you you have to feel it yourself as well. It has to be enjoyable for you. And there was just something. I'm not a big fan of AI summarizing applications, AI chatbot applications. Just personally, not a big fan of those, which is what AI Notebook is. But I'm not a big fan of those. many people out there are actually a big fan of those applications, but I still think that there is some time before I'm at the point where I can blindly trust AI. And that is the problem with a lot of these applications. But the point again is that the to-do list application I'm testing out feels really good. It does a lot of the fundamentals right, like um, it works, it looks beautiful. The main features work. There are a few bugs, but it is also in a really, really early stage where you have to book a demo to actually use the application, which then again is different from an application that is out there for everyone to use and pay for. So I think the point here is that there are a lot of thoughts and a lot of things you have to think about when you publish videos like I do. But I am, and I think everyone else is too, or most people are trying to balance this as much as they can. But that covers it for today's podcast episode. So I just wanted to give you my thoughts around uh, around around having to review, or not having to, but reviewing applications as a passion, and trying to balance that with the honesty you give to your audience, which is always the most important thing, but you also don't want to crush application and crush applications and talk badly about people's effort. So trying to balance those things, it is really hard. And I just wanted to jump on and talk about my thought process around it. That covers it for today's episode. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below. I will try to get to them as soon as I can. Thank you so much for watching.